Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. Today, I've got some huge news, and that is that Wargaming on Tuesday will release a sandbox test server to test dramatic changes to one of the very fundamental aspects of World of Tanks, and that is the way that equipment works and also the way that the consumables work on low-tier tanks. As you can see, there is a lot to discuss here, but luckily for me, Wargaming have released a developer's diaries video on their YouTube channel where they have presented most of the key concepts, so let's check it out together. So firstly, one of the things I want to clarify is that all of this is subject to change. This is going up onto a sandbox test server, so everything that you see here may or may not go into the game, and Wargaming are looking for our feedback into the matter. And so, if you have strong opinions after watching this video, make sure that you deliver them. Whether you think that this looks awesome or whether you think that this looks absolutely horrific. So without further ado, let's introduce the Wargaming staff members who have been hard at work on this new Equipment 2.0.
I'm a game designer.
Hello, my name is Anton, and I'm a game balance designer. Let me tell you about the main changes that were made to the game interface. The main changes were made to the lower panel of vehicle equipment. Modules were removed from here, and the appearance of equipment has changed. It's now showed as cards. Consumables look the same, as do directives. And now shells have additional information, and the text size is bigger.
So this is immediately cool. Finally, Wargaming are actually going to show shell velocity inside the garage, some of the hidden statistics that you won't be able to find there, or you're only going to get them through third-party websites like TanksGG. You're going to know just how slow some of the low-tier British derps are, and just how fast some of the top-tier medium tanks like the Leopard and K91 are with regards to their APCR shells.
Making it easier to read. Modules can be changed in the research window as before. This is the IS-7. So it only has one set of modules. But if we take a vehicle that has several sets of modules, for example the M4A 3E8 Sherman, we can still change the configuration of its turret, engine, and gun just like we used to.
Anton, could you show us how all of this will look for lower tier vehicles? Like, take a tier 1 vehicle for example,
ready.
please.
Get ready,
Sure.
YouTube.
Let's look at tier 1. I happen to have the Cruiser Mark 1 in my garage. This is what it looks like.
Yeah. That pretty much says it all. There are no equipment and no consumable slots on this tier 1 tank.
We'll probably have to explain what's happened here.
Yeah, please Wargaming, explain.
It's all gone, Chief.
Yep.
What happened here is the number of equipment slots was reduced to 0. The slots for consumables and directives are also gone.
On a
We will,
tier
of
1
course,
tank,
explain
that
why
is.
this has happened. Currently, we observe several trends that we would like to change.
It's hard for new players to figure out the game mechanics, particularly equipment,
Incredibly.
consumables, and directives.
I've been saying for years, delivering feedback at every single opportunity, that the new player experience in World of Tanks it's like banging your head against a brick wall. To say that the new player experience is a steep learning curve is absolutely brutal. But what makes it even worse is the fact that experienced players have advantages that new players just can't even begin to fathom. How can they have a pair of binoculars? How can they have a camo net in their first few games? They don't have enough credits. How can they afford consumables? A lot of veteran players will go in and use premium consumables and possibly even, the bounty equipment that has been going into the game recently to absolutely wipe the floor for the new players.
The more experienced players who own and mount various pieces of equipment
And it
have
makes a
substantial
huge
advantage over the newer
difference.
players.
It's
Another
dramatic.
peculiarity of the current system is that the equipment at low tiers is pretty expensive.
Yep.
Players have to play tens or even hundreds of battles in low-tier vehicles.
I don't. I put tens? Are you kidding me? The one piece of equipment costs 500,000 credits. I'd like to see the tier 1 tank that is making 50,000 credits a game, please. It's definitely going to be hundreds, absolutely hundreds, to be able to get it.
At the same time,
And that's if you're a reasonably okay player.
For equipment in high-tier vehicles, and its cost looks much more reasonable compared to the cost of the vehicle.
That's true.
The other issue is related to assortment. For example, in the current system, there are only several popular equipment types. The absolute favorites are the gun rammer,
Yes.
improved ventilation,
Definitely.
gun laying drive,
Yes.
gun stabilizer, camo net, and the binocular telescope.
Gun laying drive? Not so much. Maybe for a tank that has about minimum three, most likely 3.5 seconds aim time. But really, the gun laying drive is is a very overrated piece of equipment. And you're probably better to use vents on the tank, especially now that vents are getting so much better inside the game. They make everything about your tank better. Camo net as well, very overrated in World of Tanks, only useful in a very niche position. And really, you can just use bushes instead of using a camo net. Binocular telescope and everything else they've talked about, sure. Absolute MVP pieces of equipment.
Telescope. The others are practically not used.
Look at them all here. Super, well, I already say it, super heavy spore liner. That's fantastic on a tank like the Mouse. The toolbox is good on some vehicles without turrets that you really want to just keep rolling forwards on. Maybe the Jagdpanzer or something like a Tortoise especially. Some of these, I can't even remember. I guess these are improved grousers that increase the durability of your track. This one's like an engine filter, which reduces the chance of your tank being set on fire. Yeah. Why would you, and this is a wet ammo rack to stop your tank from blowing up. Why would you ever use these pieces of equipment? We don't even need to mention the coil springs. Actually, those are probably one of the most useful pieces of equipment for a free-to-play player or a new player who doesn't have a lot of free experience to be able to unlock the tracks, to be able to get the turret and the gun on a new tank. And putting those on, you can actually skip getting the tracks, and then you can break them off the vehicle once you've finally got the tracks after you've got the more important upgrades like the track and the turret. But that's really min-maxing. How would a new player even know how to do that? It's something that even I have only just recently started doing on my free-to-play account. These pieces of equipment, they're redundant, and really the only ones that I recommend to use is in the following order. Rammer is the most important, then probably afterwards vertical stabilizers if your tank can use them. Then you want to be using vents, and if you care about view range, you want to be using coated optics probably instead of the vents. And very few tanks that can't use vertical stabilizers would use a gun lane drive instead. Some tanks use binocular telescope to be able to get up to that 450 meter view range mark.
Additionally, there is currently a lot of equipment that has the same effect but at different prices. And this equipment fits different vehicles.
Some vents cost 50,000, some cost 600,000.
Gun rammer.
Yep.
This may not only confuse you, but simply forces you to spend credits to purchase new equipment when switching vehicles. This leads to another.
What do you mean when switching vehicles? Are you telling me that you actually demount for gold? I've never demounted for gold on my free-to-play account. That's absolutely ludicrous. I think I just sell it and I sell the modules, sell all of the equipment when I sell the tank. People really demounting this equipment instead of just getting new stuff? I think gold is precious. You can't get it for free, right?
Other issue, a lack of configuration diversity. Generally, one of three basic combinations is used.
True.
No matter the vehicle type.
True.
Gun laying drive.
No, don't use a gun lane drive. Don't listen to them. Maybe on a tank, once again, with 3.5 or 4 seconds aim time, it's very overrated. And you always use vertical stabilizers instead of a gun lane drive. A gun lane drive is probably one of the weaker modules that they're going to discuss in this kind of meta.
Gun rammer.
Sure.
Gun stabilizer, improved ventilation.
That's a good set.
Gun rammer,
that's a good set.
Gun stabilizer.
But what? Gun stabilizer? But why do they keep missing out coated optics? Why are they not mentioning using coated optics on a tank like this? You either use coated optics or vents. None of this gun lane drive shenanigans.
Gun lane drive, gun rammer.
Don't use it.
Statistics tell us that any other configuration is a rare sight. And
unusual.
Finally, most equipment types currently improve characteristics related to the vehicle's firepower.
Because that's
Very
important,
few
right?
equipment items affect the maneuverability or survivability, for example.
Well, there are equipment that affect that, but they're just not as comparable. The firepower boost that you get from a gun ram, a 10% rate of fire from vents. If you get bounty vents, that's 7.5% crew skills, which is going to actually increase your rate of fire by 3.75 as well. That's absolutely massive, dramatic impact on the tank, unlike the other pieces of equipment.
So it turns out that light and medium tanks can't improve some of their key characteristics.
Oh, yeah, they can, because remember that firepower is pretty much just as important for a light or medium tank as it is for a tank destroyer or a heavy tank. And also view range on those vehicles. You can definitely improve those with coated optics and binoculars.
As all of the listed issues are pretty complex and interconnected,
They are.
it means that the new features that we are planning to add to the game may affect several game aspects at the same time.
That's very true, and that's why I'm incredibly worried about any changes they can make to the equipment system, because it could just absolutely destroy the game itself.
Interface, economy, gameplay, and others.
Interface and economy, not really. players, do we really care that? Game balance, on the other hand, which I believe that all three of these gentlemen are involved in, that's the one that they should be focused on.
Speaking of decreasing the number of equipment and consumable slots for low tiers, we have simplified the gameplay considerably.
It's true.
We are now looking at Tier 1, and it only has shells, but Tier 2 already has an additional slot for equipment and another.
See, I like this idea. I like the idea that when you get to Tier 2, now you get one piece of equipment and one piece of consumables. But what happens when a Tier 2 tank needs to play against Tier 3s? And what happens when Tier 3s need to play against Tier 4s? And especially, what happens when Tier 1s play against Tier 2s, as I've been noticing? Now that Wargaming have increased the hit points of the low-tier vehicles to kind of smooth out that spike in durability, now they're kind of making it so that the higher tier vehicles are going to be more powerful, not just because of their statistics, but also because of the equipment that they're putting on the vehicle. I'm not sure about this one. My solution to all of this, back in the day that I've been suggesting for years, is to make tiers 1, 2, and 3 a safe place where all of the equipment is just free for a new player. That would allow them to experiment with it rather than just ease them into it by just giving them smaller amounts of slots to experiment with it. It kind of still makes sense. I can understand why they've done this from both monetization and also from a thinking that that's going to allow a player to ease into the equipment system rather than just having a good tutorial inside the game.
For consumables.
Thanks to these changes, we decrease the difference between a player who has all the equipment available mounted on their vehicle
True.
and a new player who doesn't even have a proper crew.
That's a fantastic change. I can't say how important this is. And playing experience is more than enough of an advantage that you will have against a new player. That's really what the difference should be. It shouldn't be the fact that the experienced player fires 20% faster than the new player.
Technical difference will be smaller, especially at lower tiers.
It's also worth noting that the number of slots will grow with the tiers. At Tier 2, there will be 1 slot for equipment and consumables. At Tier 3, there will be 2 of each, and so on. And by Tier 5, all of the usual slots for equipment, consumables, and directives will fully return.
Directives. Yes. That's interesting that they're going to stop you from using directives at low tiers. I guess that means that you're not going to be able to have Sixth Sense anymore at low tier if they don't have a directive slot until Tier 4 or Tier 5. That's a very interesting change. So I guess now that you need to have Sixth Sense on all of your commanders at low tier again to remain competitive, that's a really big issue, Wargaming. One of the best things that you added, or at least the highlight of your directive system, was that you could afford to have Sixth Sense in your battles. It did cost you, whatever, 10, 20,000 credits per game, but at least you could do that for the low tier tanks. Now I guess the experienced players are only going to be able to get that if they invest 30,000 free experience on each one of their commanders at low tier to be able to have that Sixth Sense skill on their commander.
And this system implies that the difference between players at lower tiers will be the skill level.
No, there is still a significant... I mean, what's going to happen now if you only have one equipment slot now at low tiers at Tier 2? I don't know about you, but for me, as a player who's got millions of credits and have nothing left to really purchase inside the game that I really want, I am going to be using a premium consumable, probably the one that increases my crew skills by 10%. I'm not going to use a repair kit. I'm not going to use a med kit. I'm just going to slam a premium consumable on my Tier 2 tank, and I'm still going to be 5% better than everybody else with regards to all of the statistics about the tank. Here we go, Equipment 2.0.
3 classes to solve the issue of the high cost at low and middle tiers in the current system.
Okay.
For example, if we take a Tier 2 vehicle and try mounting something on it, we will see that...
Oh, fantastic change. Really like that. That's a much fairer price. 50,000 credits for a Tier 2 tank. It's a much fairer price. The idea of putting coated optics class 3 looks like they've broke them down into different classes. Great stuff, Wargaming.
More than 50,000 credits and have class 3 in the name.
Great.
It's the lowest one. Let's take improved ventilation, for example. It will be available for 50,000 credits.
As it is now.
Standard 5% bonus. If we go to a mid-tier vehicle, let's say Tier 6, and try mounting something here, we will see that all the items cost around 200,000 credits. They have class 2 in the name, the middle one, and they have the same bonus. And a Tier 10 vehicle, like the BotShot 25, can access Class 1 equipment. It costs 600,000 credits on average. But if some equipment costs less and was available for the vehicle, like the Class 2 improved ventilation was available for the BotShot, then it will have the same cost as before. It will not become more expensive.
That's interesting, so that some tanks which used to have the cheap events will actually have the cheap events still at high tiers. I guess they're doing that because otherwise if people have the vents on their tanks, And then they, I guess it would be weird that you would have had you bought it when it was cheaper, and now it's going to be more expensive on the vehicle.
Expensive.
Like Anton said, we couldn't divide all equipment by class. We have some exceptions.
What are they?
Mainly, these exceptions are related to some equipment having different categorization, like spall liners.
Ah, because of the weight.
Yes, Yuri, let me
Sure.
explain a bit more.
Sure.
The spall liners are now divided into 4 types. Basically, it's the same as before. They're light, medium.
Okay, light, medium, and wow, look at it. Oh my gosh, there's new pieces of equipment that we're going to be taking a look at. Minus 30%, minus 30 seconds to consumables cooldown.
Medium,
what are we going to be
heavy,
discussing it all?
and super heavy ones. Speaking of exceptions, we should also mention the camouflage net now has 2 classes. The
Does it?
cheaper camo net will cost 50,000 credits, and the one that's available for the top vehicles will cost 100,000. The
There's no real change there.
stabilizer, as before, will not be available for all vehicles. For example, for TDs or vehicles of lower tiers. The Class 2 stabilizer will be able for mounting on mid-tier vehicles, and the Class 1 vertical stabilizer will be available for vehicles of tiers 8 to 10.
That just made me think, if they're having different classes of camo nets, is the camo net still going to be demountable? Are binoculars going to be demountable?
So, it will not have Class 3.
That's right. The same system is available for the new equipment that can only be mounted on the mid and top tier vehicles.
The various equipment items that affect the suspension durability were gathered together into one piece. So we now have just one type instead of 21 as
Thank
before.
goodness.
And it has 3 price variants. It can be installed on all vehicles, so you will not have to purchase additional equipment to improve the suspension if you switch your vehicle.
Or pre-purchase them for half price when there's equipment sales.
Change is good, of course, but we've added a lot of new equipment items and changed how some of the old ones worked in some places. Anton,
Let us know.
Show us what's new at the low tiers.
Oh, let me know.
For example, at Tier 2, there is a way to improve your accuracy and engine power.
You can improve your accuracy and your engine power with a piece of equipment?
As well as the concealment, independent on whether the
10% engine power as a piece of equipment. Or it could be plus 15% if you're mounting it into a specific slot, as I'm going to be talking about later, or they're going to be talking about later. 5% better accuracy? What is
vehicle
this?
is moving or stationary.
What's this? 6% extra or 9% extra concealment for a light tank or a medium tank as a piece of equipment? Oh, God. Can you imagine what an EBR is going to be able to do if it can get an additional 9% concealment? We're going to see over 50% concealment EBRs. Even if you have 500 meters view range, you won't see them until 250 meters if that's the case.
So even low-tier vehicles have new equipment, and the high-tier ones have plenty more.
If we take a Tier 10 light tank as an example and try to find something to improve its scouting ability, we can see there are a lot of new items here.
What are these? Wow, I'll be talking
For
about all of
example,
these
you can increase
afterwards.
the time the enemy vehicle is spotted. Or
Decrease the enemy
you were spotted
time
yourself.
you were spotted, increase
Improve your
the
ability to spot moving enemies, and so on.
plus 7.5% to concealment. Minus 7.5% to concealment of moving enemies, or 12.5% of moving enemies. So that means, wow, you can become like a counter scout. That's such a specific role. That's so weird. So you can reduce the concealment of moving enemies. I guess it will work on a light tank as well. Okay, so you're going to have the enemy EBR kind of boosting their camo rating. Are you meant to do this to be able to reduce the enemy's camo rating so you can see moving enemies better? Bizarre.
And what about the old ones? We did change a lot of the old equipment items.
Let's take the wet ammo rack. Its effect was improved considerably. The bonus to durability used to be 50%. Now it's 100%. We also decreased the penalty for the damage ammo rack and added a unique effect that prevents the player's ammo rack from exploding.
This is not the only change that we made to all equipment. Far from it. And we have new items. There'll be a lot to play with and figure out.
Anton, let's show the equipment that allows players to increase the hit points of their vehicles. Let's use the mouse as an example.
What an unexpected choice.
Yes, the mouse. The most durable vehicle in the game has many
3,000
equipment items that can
base
increase its
hit points.
survivability. There are the old faithfuls, like the spall liners, and the new ones, like the improved consumables and its
Oh my lord. Look, improved hardening, plus 10% to vehicles' hit points, rounded to 1 decimal point upwards.
increased
Wow.
hit points. So the mouse has 3,000 hit points by default, and if we mount this equipment to it,
Yeah, but one thing I'd like to highlight is they're being a little bit sneaky right now, because they're putting the increased hit points in the wrong slot. They'll be talking about this in a couple of minutes. I have watched this video before. If they were to put it, I believe, in the survivability slot, it would actually increase the mouse's hit points to 3,300, as far as I'm aware. But remember, this is an equipment slot. You are having to make sacrifices in other areas of your tank to be able to use it.
you will receive 150 additional hit points. Considering the good armor that it has, these 150 hit points may help win a battle.
I expect on the test server on Tuesday that if you put it in the correct slot, it might be 300 hit points to
Historically, most of our
3,300.
equipment items affected mainly the firepower of the vehicle, and thus the influence on all vehicle characteristics was not really balanced.
I don't agree with that statement. There are actually quite a few pieces of equipment that don't affect firepower. It's just you don't pick them because the firepower equipment is the one that's meta and the one that actually allows you to kill the enemy tanks faster.
To solve this issue, we diversified the equipment assortment considerably in the parts that relate to other characteristics, because the firepower part already feels pretty good as it is. Anton, show us what new categories we have now.
Taking the IS-7 as an example, we can see that it has different icons and different slots that say that this slot belongs to a category. In this case, the first slot has the special category of survivability, the second has mobility, and the third one doesn't have any. On the bot shot, for example, the first one has the mobility specialization, and the second one is scouting. On the STRV-103, it's scouting and firepower.
Do these specializations depend on the vehicle type?
They depend on both the vehicle type and its role. The IS
This is very interesting. So what Wargaming are doing is they're giving specific tanks specific equipment slots. You can still put any piece of equipment in any slot that you want, but if you choose to put a class of equipment slot on the tank in its designated equipment slot, for lack of a better word, then it's actually going to get a slight bonus.
7 had survivability and mobility, whereas the mouse had survivability and survivability. Both vehicles are tier 10 heavy tanks, but they are played very differently.
And for the mouse, I will be able to only mount the survivability equipment in these slots?
If we try to mount something there, we will see that we have all equipment available in both the first and second slots, and the latter one doesn't have a category. The difference is that the first slot provides an increased bonus to characters.
There it is. Look, it's saying plus 10% vehicle hit points. So if they were to put the improved hardening in there, it would do it. Oh my lord.
Say in this slot, this equipment item gives plus 50%.
Module
and this one only
durability.
plus 30%.
Wow.
I'd like to add about bounty and improved equipment.
Yeah, let's find
They
out.
already have an increased bonus compared to the standard equipment. Therefore, the bounty and improved equipment items will not benefit from the slot bonus.
But hold on, they've already buffed them. Look, the bounty rammer now does 13.5%, whereas previously it only did 12.5% now. Wow.
Yes, if we look at the extended spare parts kit, it adds the same bonus, irrespective of which slot I choose.
Okay, so
At
you
the
don't
same
have to put
time,
bounty
its
equipment in a
standard
specific
counterpart, the
slot.
toolbox adds 35 in the category slot and 25 in the normal slot.
So, just to put that into perspective, and this is how important Wargaming think bounty equipment is. Bounty equipment, the toolbox, 45%, okay? But if you choose, or bounty equipment, bond equipment, whatever you want to call it, improved equipment, as I believe they call it. If you were to put on the sandbox test server, a regular toolbox inside the survivability slot, the equipment slot on the mouse, for example, it would do 35% repair speed. But if you were to put it in any other slot on the mouse, the generic slot, it would do 25%. So that really hits home how much Wargaming want these slots to kind of help other players. They want to try and mitigate a little bit of the differences between some of the pieces of equipment. They want to try and mitigate a little bit of the difference if you use the slots correctly on a tank between using bounty equipment and using regular equipment, but only if you have it on a specific slot, and the difference is still not even. So your bounty equipment is still going to be by far the best, irrelevant of what slot you put it in. But if you choose to put regular equipment in a slot, you can mitigate a little bit of the differences between the disparity between the equipment
so it means
grades.
that we can now create different equipment sets for one vehicle to play different objectives?
Yes, if we take the mouse and build it for survivability, we can mount the toolbox in the third slot. The increased hit points go in the first slot, and the second one will have the spawn liner.
There it is. Look, mouse hit points, 3,310. Woof.
This will be one equipment set.
Oh,
we can mount something
baby.
for firepower in the empty slot. Let's say it will be a gun rammer. And we'll mount the fill tanks with CO2 in the survivability slot to avoid being set ablaze. We can ignore the category of the first slot and have a stabilizer there, for example.
Which is kind of
We'll
important.
have to make a manager for these builds next.
Yes,
to be able to
please.
save them and switch between them quickly.
Multiple
So, brace
equipment.
yourselves.
Wow, that you heard it here first. Multiple equipment loadouts for your tanks. Hopefully we're going to be able to switch between them. It's not on the sandbox server that will be released on Tuesday that you can all participate in. But there's a possibility that in the future there will be an equipment manager. That would be absolutely amazing wargaming, especially for something like Frontline. I hate in Frontline having my tier 8s and I have to set them up in a specific way for Frontline and it doesn't save it. And then when I want to play them in the random queue, I feel like I have to rejig everything on the vehicle.
We keep talking about the Moss Butlet switch to the Bot Shot 25T for a minute. I think we can make a build which boosts both firepower and gun handling, for example. Hey, let's try to make a build like that, Anton.
Let's try.
Okay, so now we can actually find how much improved ventilation class 2 do if they put them in the specific slot. 6.5%. So it looks like bounty vents will be doing 8.5%, regular vents 5%, but if you put regular vents in the specific slot, it's 6.5%. The disparity has pretty much still stayed the same, apart from by
Ventilation is an
0.5%.
easy pick, considering the match with the slot. Both the vents and the slot have mobility, so this will provide an increased bonus. The stabilizer in the second slot will allow an increase in shooting accuracy, and we can use either the existing gun laying drive or the new sighting gear for increased accuracy when fully aimed.
That's amazing. Imagine an STR V103B with an improved accuracy coefficient. That would be absolutely wild. Let me just rewind for even just a second and see if he mouses over it so that I can see if it improves if you use it in a specific slot. That'll be super powerful.
This will be the build for firepower with increased firing accuracy and a slightly faster magazine reload.
You may probably also need better view range and mobility in teamfights.
Yes, let's build the Scout Hybrid. Put everything into view range and concealment.
Let's use filters, Anton, so that we only see what we need.
Sure, let's apply filters. For mobility, we can mount the increased maximum speed.
Increased maximum speed? You can make a Batchat go 6 kilometers an hour faster?
Or the increased engine power, or the increased reverse
15% increased engine power?
speed while moving. The
Maximum backward speed?
shot has a very good specific power, but it could still use an increase to its maximum speed.
The Batchat can go at 71 kilometers an hour if you put additional forward transmission on
Let's
it.
give it an extra plus 6 kilometers per hour to the top speed. This will bump it to
Yeah,
71
indeed.
kilometers per hour. The
Indeed.
second slot has the scouting.
That's how I feel. A Batchat going at 71? What about if you put it on an EBR? Does that mean the EBR is going to be able to go at 101 if it's 6 kilometers an hour plus? Looks like the EBR 105 might be able to go at 101.
specialization. And the bot shot has 6 different items for scouting. There are the old types of optics and the new ones. Here, the improved radio looks quite interesting, as it will increase the time that enemies are spotted, which will be useful for the bot shot. And in the third slot, as it has no category, we can mount something that we liked before, but didn't have the opportunity to use. It can be, let's say, additional grousers, which provide a boost to the hull traverse speed.
No.
And
I mean, I can understand boosting the hull traverse speed a little bit, but on the Batchat especially, which is a bit of like a drag car, the way that it turns. But no, you should use vents always
hit to
still.
the maximum speed faster.
Basically, the possibilities here are endless.
Maybe the possibilities are endless, but what is the correct pick? I think it might be staying a little bit too similar.
Yes, so what we have here is that at higher tiers, 2 slots have a category, but it's not mandatory.
Kind of is,
It
still.
doesn't force players to mount this exact type of equipment there.
It doesn't.
You can use anything you want.
You could do.
However, in that case, you will not receive a bonus in that category, but there's no penalty either. The equipment will work as intended.
Basically, you can even leave all your equipment as you have it now.
And it would probably
Yes,
still be the
sure,
best.
But on the other hand, I'd strongly recommend trying and playing around with the categorized slots.
Maybe for some
At
fun.
least on the sandbox.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now you can set your vehicles up in very different ways, depending on either your play style or the game modes that you're going to play.
That'd be great if they have an equipment manager. That'd be fantastic. Looking forward to it.
You
Okay,
probably have
conversion.
questions
So what's
about
going to
the
happen with
equipment
all of our
conversion
current equipment?
process. It's a really important issue, and our main goal in this case is that players do not lose anything during the conversion. I'm talking about both the certain equipment items and its cost and credits. Of course, all old equipment items will be converted to the
I must have spent... I don't think it's an exaggeration when I say about 500 million credits on equipment for all of my tanks. It must be about 200, 300 million credits on equipment on my vehicles.
new ones, and the conversion will happen considering the peculiarities of the new system.
Also, you shouldn't worry about improved equipment. It'll be moved to the depot for free.
Okay, so if you've got improved
Additionally,
equipment that you spent with
when the
bonds, then you'll
conversion happens
be
on the
able to
main
reapply
server,
it.
Every player will receive a certain number of demounting kits.
Welcome.
Somebody subbing to me while I'm making a video? Don't
As
do
we
that.
already said, it's not guaranteed that everything we're testing on the sandbox will be released.
Good.
It's a place for experiments after all.
I
And
agree.
a way to share our ideas with you.
Exactly. We are sharing our hypotheses with you, studying them and improving them, so your opinion will also influence the final state of the new equipment in the game.
Come play in the sandbox, leave your feedback, participate in testing, and fill out the survey. See you soon.
So, as I started with the video, very important that we all deliver our feedback. Okay, so Wargaming also have a forum article that is... It left out some of the aspects of the video, so I wanted to make sure we watched the video first, but now I'm going to go over the important parts of the... I'm going to go over the important parts of the forum article. And also, I'm going to make sure that I deliver my feedback about the bits that I liked and also the bits that I didn't like. So firstly, the idea of changing the available slots. Now, it is addressing a problem in the game. The problem that experienced players can afford to be able to put consumables and equipment on their tanks, and they have crew skills on all of their crews that the new players won't possibly have. I guess by limiting the slots, it makes it so that new players can spend a little bit less to get competitive, and experienced players will be able to have less opportunity to make their vehicles better. But also, really, to still have one consumable slot, you're going to have to spend your 10, your 20,000 credits per game as an experienced player to go in and stomp by using, you know, your cola, your buchti, or that premium consumable that just makes you better than all of the other players. So it's kind of mitigating a little bit, but it's not really completely addressing the problem. I think that Wargaming could have completely fixed the problem by maybe making all consumables free for the low tier. They could have easily done it for 1, 2, 3, and 4. They could have made it so that it was like an area where you experimented as a new player, or even as a middle experienced player. You drop down to low tier and see what the equipment does to make it, see how it affects all of the different vehicles, and then you can use what you've learned towards the upper tiers. I think if all equipment was free but only mountable on tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's perfectly possible with the system that they've implemented, or maybe all consumables were free up until tier 4, then that would allow new players to be able to learn, and they would have just the same advantages as the experienced players. Other things that Wargaming could do is they could make it so you can't use premium consumables at low tier. That would stop the main advantage that premium players have at low tiers against the new players. I should not be able to use cola against the enemy at below tier 5. Or even, I probably shouldn't be able to use it at all. If Wargaming would make that move, that would fix a lot of the disparity between advanced players and new players and the seal clubbing that goes on there. But whether they choose to do that and accept the impact of the hit that it will have on, I guess, credits that people spend at low tiers, experienced players going down and seal clubbing, that's up to them. But that would be a much bigger change. Don't allow players to use premium consumables below tier 5. just like they're doing with the directive slot. Like, why would anybody use directives on low tier tanks? It's beyond me. It's still not going to fix the problem. It helps it a little bit. I think there were easier and cleaner cut and fairer ways for new players to be able to help the issues that they have to try and deal with. And one of the things, again, I'd like to highlight is that if there's now no directive slot at low tiers, that means that you're going to have to play without Sixth Sense unless you have spent pretty much about 15 or 30,000 free experience on boosting that commander up to the first skill. Okay, so let's move on now to introducing categories for slots and equipment. I like this idea. I actually like it. But I also think it's a bit arbitrary. I think what's going to happen now is that Wargaming are going to decide... It seems to be a bit of a two-faced approach. In one way, they want to add all of these new pieces of equipment into the game so you can play the tank how you want to. But in the other way, as we saw with the mouse, they're giving it 2 survivability slots. So you feel like you have to use the survivability equipment. What happens if you want to play the mouse as some kind of a breakthrough vehicle? I know it's not going to be the fastest, but maybe you want to increase the firepower of the mouse. Now you're going to be at a disadvantage compared to a player who wants to just increase the survivability of the mouse purely because of the equipment slot bonuses because of the categories. Seems a bit weird to me. They want to increase your opportunity to customize your tanks, but they also want to try and squeeze all of the different tanks to fitting a specific role. So if you're worried about your improved and bounty equipment becoming worse than all of the other equipment, as you can clearly see, it's the first thing that Wargaming talk about when they talk about that they're introducing equipment slots. And that is that they're reassuring all of the players out there who have managed to get their bonds or to get the bounty equipment that don't worry, it's still going to be better than everything that the poor players can afford. I'm sorry, it's true though. Nobody has a bounty gun rammer who didn't spend 6,500 gold to be able to get it in the first season. But don't worry, your bounty gun rammer that you paid your 6,500 gold for is going to fire 13.5% faster, which is going to be 3.5% faster than any tanks that don't have a firepower slot, and 2% faster than the ones that do. As I've been saying since improved equipment was first introduced, the only players who can really afford improved equipment are people who take part in clan wars, people who take part inside the ranked battles. They're the only real ones who are going to be able to get the bonds in the quantities that you need to be able to have them on multiple tanks. Those kind of players, you don't want to be the best because you fire faster than everybody else. And now Wargaming are taking it to the next level, and they're making it so that the players who pay more can fire faster than everyone else. Wargaming, what are you doing? How can you think that this is a good way to monetize your game? You're literally allowing people to pay to fire faster. And I have no idea why the player base is sitting back and accepting this. I personally think that the bounty equipment, the improved equipment, this would be a great opportunity for Wargaming to make it fair for players. Make the bounty equipment or the vent equipment special because you can effectively mount it in every slot, but if you were going to use the set bonuses on the vents, why shouldn't your vents go up to be the same as bounty equipment if you put them in a specific slot? Why shouldn't the gun rammer go as fast as the improved equipment? Why has Wargaming made these steps to just make sure that that equipment that you bought, you're still going to be able to fire faster than everybody else? Really makes me question the longevity of the game and the direction that Wargaming are taking it if they're literally 10 years after the game was released, when every other multiplayer title is moving away from pay to win. They're kind of ramping it up inside their title. So now let's take a look at all of the different equipment in all of the different 4 slots. Firstly, firepower, vents, 6.5% if you put it in a firepower slot. Gun lane drive, I don't think that's really going to be too useful. Improved aiming unit, I guess that's just going to make you more accurate. Minus 9% to the aiming circle, so that's literally 9% increased accuracy. So if you there's 2 ways of using this, I guess. One way is to make a really inaccurate tank a bit more accurate, or the other way is to min-max to try and take your Stridsvagn 103B, which has got 0.25 base accuracy, and make it even better by putting that in a firepower slot. Now, I still don't think that that's even close to a gun rammer. Why would you want to be 9% more accurate when you can just fire 11.5% faster? When you're at close quarters range, you don't need to be accurate anyway. The gun rammer is always going to be useful. The accuracy buff, it's going to be useful a very small percentage of the time. The idea of all of these equipment, I mean, let's be honest, which one are you going to put in your firepower slot? You're either going to put the vents in or you're going to put the gun rammer in. That is a given. Everything else here it's just not going to be able to compete. No matter what they put in, like the gun traverse amplifier, where you get plus 30% to turret traverse speed, that could be quite funky in something like an E100, but for every time you get an E100 that turns its turret faster, you're going to have an E100 that simply just can't fire as quickly as the enemy E100. Let's take a look at the survivability section here. Spore liners, definitely getting more funky. Toolbox, it's getting close, but still you'd probably want to have one of the not the bounty ones, but the improved pieces of equipment, which is 45%. Absolutely ludicrous. Let's move on to the real new ones. Improved consumables, minus 50 seconds for cooldown of consumables. That's amazing for putting it in that slot. Previously, your repair kit would have been used once every 90 seconds. With minus 50 seconds, it's going to be used once every 40 seconds. That is really big. And that is one of the new pieces of equipment that I would actually consider using. It's especially if you're playing a heavy tank or if you're locked in place. But then again, I just realized you can just use a premium consumable, right? Yeah, probably still better to just use premium consumables and try and focus on having another piece of equipment in the slot. So module protection plus 50% to module durability, that kind of removes the need for improved consumables. I think if my modules are going to last 50% longer, then why would I need to repair them as often, right? Improved hardening plus 10% to vehicle durability. That's impressive on something like a mouse. There's no doubt that having a mouse with 3,300 hit points is going to last longer than a mouse with 3,000 hit points. It also means that certain other skills become more important. Think about adrenaline rush on your loader. With adrenaline rush on your loader, it's all about how many hit points your vehicle has. A mouse with 300 hit points will have its adrenaline rush activated, or maybe 299. If you were to have improved hardening on the vehicle, it would actually be a 329 hit point mouse would get that adrenaline rush. So there are definitely some interactions with the way that the game mechanics work that Wargaming are going to have to think about. There's also another new module called Improved Tank Helmet, which reduces stun duration by 40%, reduces the negative effect of stun by 50%, and minus 30% to additional stun duration. But I would just look at the spore liner and think about, why would you really want to do that when you can kind of just use the spore liner? The spore liner kind of does all of that, but also protects you from ramming and explosions as well. I think the spore liner is probably still going to be the improved module there. All right, let's move on to mobility. What kind of funky things do we have here? All right, so improved onboard geared boxes. So wheeled vehicles get plus 17.5% to hull traverse. So I like this. I like the fact that Wargaming are already accounting for how this is going to affect wheeled vehicles. Wheeled vehicles will get less of a bonus to their traverse speed than tracked vehicles will. That's absolutely huge, by the way. Improved speed of hull traverse about its axis, 40% for tracked vehicles. I can only imagine what that's going to do to the T100 LT. In fact, that's the first thing that I'm going to do on the sandbox test server on Tuesday, is I'm going to put those on my T100 LT, and I am going to become the EBR. Yeah, you're going to have T100 LTs wig-wagging around just like EBRs are. This is also very impressive as well. Additional forward transmission, plus 6 kilometers to top speed. Do you know what's very interesting about that? That doesn't really make so much of a difference on an EBR. Sure, it's going to make an EBR go from 95 to 101 kilometers an hour. Yeah, they're going to be going over 100 again. But what's very impressive about that is imagine putting that on a TOG. Oh yeah, boys and girls, are we going to have a TOG that can go at 19 kilometers an hour? That's massive. If it's not percentage, if it's not plus 6% mobility, if it's actually a flat rate of plus 6 kilometers an hour to top speed, that's insane. Another thing that's really funky is that there's one that does reverse speed. Look, additional reverse transmission plus 4 kilometers backwards. If you were to put that on a mouse, for example, the mouse could go backwards at 19 kilometers an hour. That's pretty much the same speed that it goes forwards. That could be hilarious as well. There are also some tanks that do reverse side scraping in the game. There are some vehicles that can go backwards pretty much just as fast as they can go forwards as well. Putting that piece of equipment on it would be hilarious. The real problem is, however, is that while we can joke all about a TOG that can go at 9... Actually, for a TOG, that actually could be pretty cool. Maybe for one single tank in the game. But are you really going to consider going 6 kilometers an hour faster when you can improve all of the crew skills of your tank by 6.5% in the same slot? Not so sure, boys and girls. Not so sure, boys and girls. I have to admit, this is going to be very interesting. I'm really looking forward to streaming the Sandbox test server on Tuesday and trying out all of these different modules. Increases the speed of changing direction when in motion for vehicle types plus 17.5%. Increases the speed of hull traverse about its axis. What's the difference between that? That's interesting. Increases the speed of changing direction when in motion for 2 vehicle types. Increases the speed of hull traverse about its axis for 2 vehicle types plus 40%. Or plus 4%. So that one, oh wow, it looks like this one's actually meant for wheeled vehicles and not tracked vehicles, and this one's meant for tracked vehicles and not wheeled vehicles. Oh dear. So this one is plus 17.5% for wheeled vehicles. Oh dear. So we're going to actually have more EBRs that are going to be wiggling around. All right, so let's move on to scouting now, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of the game. You notice how the events are just in every single slot, apart from survivability. That's amazing. So vents are still going to be on pretty much every single vehicle in the game. All right, binocular telescope, 27.5% view range. That's fair because really, if binoculars had gone up to 30 or 35, that would have just been absolutely insane. Camo net will be 17.5% for tank destroyers. That one will be very interesting indeed. Another thing that is interesting is that Wargaming, for the scouting, do you notice how they're actually making it so that the pieces of equipment have different effects for different types of tanks? So, low noise exhaust system, they've realized that if you were to have a heavy tank that could have 9% extra concealment, that would be pretty wild. So they're making it so that this piece of equipment will only improve heavy tanks concealment by 4%, whereas they're making light tanks concealment get 9% extra. So is that just a flat 9% rate? That's actually pretty insane. My EBR at the moment has got, I think, 47% or 48% camo. If I got 9% additional camo on that, that would be putting me up to 55 or 56% camo. To put that into perspective, if I have 56% camo and you have 500 meters view range, then I am going to be mitigating 280 meters of your view range. You are going to be spotting me at 220 meters. 220 meters while I'm moving. Okay. But because it's most likely that the heavy tank that you may or may not be driving has very poor view range even when stationary. Sorry, poor camo rating even when stationary, that I'm going to be spotting you at 445 meters. Yeah, there's quite a few use cases here which I'm very worried about what will happen in World of Tanks if this occurs. Some of the most interesting things are that Wargaming are putting a jamming device which reduces the time that your vehicle remains spotted. So 4 seconds, that will make a really big difference for a fast vehicle like an EBR. Also plus 4 seconds for spotting an enemy vehicle. That's a lot like the directive that they use, which improves designated target, which is a skill on your gunner, if you didn't know, which keeps the enemy a little bit more lit up. I can imagine using an improved radio set, designated target, and also using the directive that improves designated target, you could keep the enemy tank lit up for a very long time indeed. One of the most interesting pieces of equipment is experimental powder. This improves the penalty that you receive after you fire to your concealment. Wargaming is suggesting 17.5%. I think that that's going to be, I'm not sure if it's a relative amount or if it's going to be an absolute amount. If it's a relative amount, that's going to be absolutely wild because currently my E25 has 25% camo when I fire. That would mean that my E25 has 40%, over 40% camo rating when I'm firing. If it's if it's an amount that it's like a multiplier effect, then that means that my E25 will probably have maybe about 30% camo when firing if I choose to use that piece of equipment. But of course, I'll have to sacrifice a lot to be able to get them. Remember, these are equipment slots. They're the most important thing. Do you really want to sacrifice the 6.5% crew skills on a tank to be able to use that? Nevertheless, it's min-maxing broken tanks. And if you can min-max broken tanks in the game to make them even more broken for the very reason why they're unbalanced in the first place, then that's going to be huge. So another piece of very interesting equipment here is Commander's Vision System. This reduces the concealment of enemy vehicles behind foliage? Are you serious? So does that mean that somebody behind a bush is going to have minus 20% concealment, and so you're going to be able to see them way easier? That could be very, very powerful for a passive scout who wants to be able to just penetrate enemies who are behind bushes. Also, panoramic triplex. Minus 12.5% to concealment of moving enemy vehicles. Wow, that will be incredibly powerful as well for a dedicated scout to be able to try and find enemy medium tanks. This will be very interesting indeed. One thing that I worry about is that does this mean that all light tanks are now going to have to basically play just as scouts and all of the combat capacity of their vehicle is going to be reduced? And are they expected to take these pieces of equipment to try and boost up their team? This is really going to change clan wars as well. In random queues, it will have some impacts, but I can imagine this will be huge for clan wars. So Wargaming are basically buffing the wet ammo rack, the full tanks with CO2, the cyclone filter, all of these to be just a little bit better. So now the ammo rack will actually prevent you from being ammo racked one time. It will improve your ammo rack's health to 1 HP so you can then repair the ammo rack so it's never going to blow up. The CO2, you'll never get set on fire. Your engine will never be destroyed with a cyclone filter. So Wargaming are not just removing the irrelevant pieces of equipment, they're actually making them better, which I think is a really good idea for everyone who chooses to use them. So let's talk about these. Well, we've kind of talked about all of these new pieces of equipment as we've looked down the list. The ones that really concern me: experimental powder on an E25. That could be crazy. Commander's view range system. If you want to try and be like a passive scout, can you imagine being a Sheridan and just putting all of those on, getting something wild like 550 meters view range and being able to penetrate all of the enemy's tanks as well? I'm going to be testing that out on the sandbox test server as well. It all seems very scary to me. It feels like the kind of meta of the game could shift, but it is going to be about creating insane metas. I'm already thinking them out in my head. I'm so excited about what I'm going to be able to do if all of these go into the game. So now we must talk about something very important. And this might be the biggest news in this entire video so far. And that is that Wargaming are planning for the binocular telescope to only be mountable on tank destroyers. Are you kidding? Are you absolutely kidding? The binocular telescope is one of the things that actually allows a new player, a free-to-play player, any player at low tier to still be able to actually spot. If you have a 75% crew, your commander can't see very far, you put a binocular telescope on and it kind of still makes it bearable. If you have a light tank and you're a free-to-play player, you don't have recon, you don't have situational awareness, you're not using a premium consumable, you put your binocular telescope on and suddenly you can actually still be useful for your team. If you're in a medium tank, for example, and you feel like you really need to be keeping on boosting that view range to actually have a scouting role for your team, gone. So what's going to happen now is that there are tanks in the game that already have completely broken view range. You know what I'm going to talk about. I'm talking about the FCM 36 Pack 40, which has 400 meters view range at tier 3. All right, so one of the only ways that you could actually counter this completely garbage, overpowered premium tank, which has no purpose in World of Tanks and just completely destroys low-tier matchmaking, was to use binoculars. You'd get into a bush near where you thought it was, set yourself up. The next time it fired, you might actually be able to spot it. Now, if you can't use binoculars, you're never going to be able to get above 400 meters view range at low tier. Yet he's going to be sitting there with his binoculars, having about 500 meters view range and going to see you if you do anything, anywhere within the 445 meters max spotting distance in the game. Wargaming, I truly hope that you have thought this through. I don't think you realize the gravity of this decision. If you remove the ability to use binocular telescope from all of the light tanks as well, what's the point of sometimes being that passive scout player at tier 8, 9, and 10 in a light tank when you could... Are we all just going to go play EBRs? Is that what we should do? Shall we all just go and play EBRs? One of the whole best things about playing a light tank was that you could use your binoculars to have more view range than an EBR could ever dream of. So that's going to be taken away from us. And also, I'd like to say that Wargaming tried to push it down at the bottom of their article, but I want to talk about it now. And that is that they are planning to make equipment like binoculars, camo net, and a toolbox not demountable. A toolbox, for goodness sake. We can't train the repair skill until we have 100% skill on our crew. That means that if you are a new player or just a free-to-play player who will not spend 800 gold whenever they get a new tank, and you're bloody right to not. These are like hell I should spend 3 or 4 euros of gold to be able to have a crew at 100% right from the get-go. That's ridiculous. What you're going to have to do now is you'll train your 75% crew. You will suffer without having any repair crew until you get them to 75 to 100%, and then you're going to have to train your repair crew on there as well. One of the very basics that you would do was to take that toolbox on your new heavies to make it bearable to play them even with a fresh crew. Now it's almost as if this demountable equipment doesn't affect the paying customers at all. The paying customers don't care. This is literally just Wargaming screwing over the free-to-play players and the new players of the game as well. Wargaming, I would thoroughly recommend, before I've even played the sandbox test server, reconsider this. Binoculars should be a staple. They should be available on every single vehicle. It allows players to actually be able to fight back, sometimes against the pay-to-win players. And the idea of not being able to mount them on anything apart from tank destroyers is A, laughable, and B, it's just nickel and diming your players to make them have to put binoculars on every single one of their tanks. Even if you are reducing the price to 50,000 at low tier, you're still going to make it so that now, whenever you buy a tank, you pretty much have to have an extra 200,000 credits on every single vehicle that you purchase at the mid tiers, and possibly, at least on your free-to-play accounts, 500,000 credits at the top tiers. The whole point of the toolbox is that you put it on your tank until your crew have got repairs, and then you can put better equipment on. Now we're going to have to just destroy it off our vehicle unless Wargaming start giving us loads of demounting kits, which they're suggesting they're going to do a little bit. I don't believe they're going to give us enough demounting kits to keep us happy inside the game. So it's always really interesting for me when Wargaming suggests that they're giving a helping hand to novices, which they kind of are, by removing game mechanics and not just giving them to them at a more affordable price. But they're also doing one of the worst things that they've ever done, which is removing the ability for the novices to be able to just get a piece of demountable equipment and then to use it on all of their vehicles until at least they have a few crew skills on them. So all in all, that is what we need to know so far. I'd like to highlight to all of you that if you go and play on the sandbox test server, that if you play 15 games, you will get a premium day on the main server. If you play 30 games, you'll get 3 days of premium on the main server. So think about it. Go and have a few games on the sandbox test server, test out all of these different pieces of equipment, and then send Wargaming your feedback with the special questionnaire that will be sent to you via the in-game client after the 8th of June. Personally, for me, I'm going to wait to the sandbox test server till I have my final opinion. I think it's really good that Wargaming are trying to diversify the types of equipment in the game, but until they actually nerf the gun rammer, until they nerf the vents inside the game, not actually make them bigger and better as to what they already currently do, then all of these new pieces of equipment, unless they make them absolutely overpowered, are not going to really be usable. Plus, I feel like the kinds of equipment bonuses they've given are for very specific tanks. Maybe that kilometer an hour will make the TOG the god. I'm really looking forward to playing the Super TOG on the sandbox test server if that's going to be the case. But really, when it comes down to it, I think that all is going to happen is the paradigm is going to stay the same. Apart from on a few specific tanks, people are still going to use the gun rammer, people are still going to use the improved vents, and people are still going to use vertical stabilizers. You're going to have to nerf them if you want people to diversify, because at the moment they are still just the clear-cut best. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, congratulations to you if you made it all the way through this video. This was probably a very long one. An hour of footage so far. Probably going to get condensed down to hopefully 40 or 50 minutes, but I have been pretty much talking the whole time. Sometimes I'm okay at that. I'm really looking forward to getting on the sandbox test server on Tuesday, though. I'll be streaming it, so definitely come along then if you want to see me try and create some super special combos. it should be a really exciting stream. I can't wait to see a fast toggle. I can't wait to see. I'm going to make a reverse mouse. I'm going to try and make the world's most healthy reverse mouse as well. We're going to have a good time. It should be a good one. So anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below if I have missed anything that you think is really exciting or anything that you really hate. There's so much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to reading all the comments. I'm probably going to have to read a good 1,000 of them. And I do read all of my comments, especially on a video like this, because this is our game. We've loved this game for 10 years, and we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we try and figure out everything that we can while Wargaming is giving us the opportunity to do so on the Sandbox test server, and we deliver them our constructive feedback.